In the dead of winter in a rural Chinese village, a young mother sat weeping by the tiny grave of her stillborn child, the snow swallowing her sobs. On her way back, she heard a faint cry. Not human, not quite animal, from the edge of the bamboo grove. When she pushed through the frozen stalks, she found a newborn monkey, its tiny body trembling, abandoned, its mother nowhere in sight. The woman clutched it to her chest, her milk still heavy with grief, and whispered, "I couldn't save my baby, but maybe I can save you." From that day forward, she vowed to raise the creature not as a beast, but as her own child. The first snow of the year had come early to the little village tucked between the mountains of Yunnan. It drifted softly from the sky, gathering on rooftops and branches, turning the earth into a quiet sea of white. But inside a small clay house at the edge of the village, warmth and sorrow clashed like fire and ice. Lin Mei sat by the cradle she had built with her own hands, woven from bamboo, polished until it shone like honey under the light. She had lined it with cotton cloth, stitched by moonlight, embroidered with red thread for luck. It was meant to hold her child, her firstborn, the baby she had prayed for through 7 long winters of marriage. But now it stood empty, as silent as the house around her. Her baby had been born too soon, too fragile, too small. Its tiny chest never learned the rhythm of breathing. The midwife had bowed her head in sorrow, and the women of the village had covered their mouths with pity. Her husband had stood stiff at the doorway, unable to speak, before leaving for the city the very next day in search of work, or perhaps to flee the weight of their grief. But Lin Mei remained. She remained because mothers don't abandon cradles, even empty ones. That morning, she pressed her cheek to the cold rim of the cradle and whispered, "I dreamed of you walking here. I dreamed of your first laugh. Now only silence answers me." The snow outside had grown heavier, cloaking the fields in white. She stepped out into the cold, wrapping her shawl tightly. The village seemed asleep, save for the barking of a dog and the distant crack of wood being chopped. It was then that she heard it, a sound so faint she thought at first it was only the wind. But it came again, thin, trembling, almost human. A cry. Her heart raced. Instinct pulled her toward it, her body moving before her mind could reason. She followed the sound through a grove of bamboo, their stalks swaying like ghosts in the snow. The cry grew sharper, more desperate, and when she pushed aside a clump of frozen leaves, she saw it. A tiny creature, shivering on the ground, half buried in snow. Its fur was slick with damp, its limbs thin as twigs, its mouth opening in a cry that pierced her heart. A newborn monkey, no bigger than a human baby. Lin Mei knelt, scooping it into her arms. Its little body was icy cold, its chest fluttering weakly like a dying candle flame. "Oh, little one," she whispered, pressing it to her breast. "Where is your mother? Who left you here in the snow?" The monkey clung to her shawl with trembling fingers, its face round, soft, helpless, nuzzling against her chest as though searching for warmth, for milk, for a mother. Something inside her cracked open, like a dam breaking. She could feel her body respond, her milk heavy from the child she had lost just days ago. Tears blurred her vision as she held the monkey close. "You're just like him," she whispered, rocking back and forth. Small, helpless, waiting for someone to care. Maybe I was meant to find you. The snow fell harder, but Lin Mei did not feel the cold anymore. She tucked the monkey into her shawl, close to her heart, and began the walk home. Each step felt like a step away from sorrow, toward something new, something unexplainable. By the time she reached her door, the little monkey was no longer crying. It slept against her, its tiny breaths warm against her skin. Lin Mei looked at the empty cradle, then at the bundle in her arms. Slowly, carefully, she lowered the creature into the bed meant for her child. It curled against the embroidered cotton, its small hands gripping the red thread like it knew it was safe. Lin Mei smiled through her tears. For the first time in weeks, her house no longer felt empty. From today, you are mine, my son. And though the world outside lay frozen and silent, inside that small clay house, there was warmth again, a fragile beginning, like a flame sheltered against the wind. The morning sun spilled gold over the snow-dusted village, painting rooftops with a warmth that promised spring, even in midwinter. Lin Mei woke to the soft stirrings of the tiny creature in the cradle. The monkey, no more than a few weeks old, blinked at the light with wide, curious eyes, its soft fur ruffling with each breath. Lin Mei sat beside the cradle, brushing her fingers gently over its head. "You're strong," she whispered, smiling. "Even the snow couldn't freeze your heart." The monkey yawned, exposing a tiny pink tongue, and nuzzled her hand with the kind of trust only the very young or very wise could show. Lin Mei's heart lifted. In its small face, she saw a reflection of the child she had lost, and yet something entirely new, bright and alive. "What shall I call you?" she mused aloud. Her voice, still tinged with grief, carried a note of excitement. "Little one, little heaven, Xiaotian." The monkey's ears twitched as if it understood, and it reached out with delicate fingers to touch her cheek. Lin Mei laughed softly. "Yes, Xiaotian. That is your name. You are my heaven now." She lifted him carefully and wrapped him in her shawl. The cold was still biting outside, but Xiaotian seemed unfazed, his tiny hands clutching her clothing as if he had always known warmth only came from human touch. Lin Mei decided that today he would experience the world outside the cradle. Carefully, she carried him through the village. The children playing in the snow stopped to stare. Even the old dog, who usually barked at anything new, sniffed curiously before wandering off. "Do not worry," Lin Mei said to the little crowd forming behind her. "He is only learning. He is my child." Xiaotian blinked at the villagers with large, intelligent eyes. Then, in a moment that made Lin Mei laugh aloud, he attempted his first step on the snow. It was a wobbling, awkward little dance, paws slipping, tail flaring for balance, but he landed on all fours, then looked up at her with a triumphant chitter. "You did it! You walked!" she exclaimed. She reached out, and Xiaotian toddled in his own monkey way, toward her, arms outstretched. The children giggled, and even a few adults smiled. The village, usually slow to warm to anything unusual, seemed caught in the joy of the little creature's triumph. Back at home, Lin Mei began the day's lessons. She set out small bowls of rice and warm water, showing Xiaotian how to scoop the grains with his tiny hands. It was messy. More rice ended up on the floor than in his mouth, but each successful bite was met with claps, laughter, and kisses on his little head. You see, Xiaotian, life is full of learning, she said, ruffling his fur, and every mistake is just a step closer to doing it right. Hours passed like moments. Xiaotian learned to respond to her calls, mimicking sounds she made. Simple words at first, broken and garbled, but full of promise. Each attempt made her laugh until tears ran down her cheeks. It was a sound she had thought she would never hear again in her home. Pure, unguarded happiness. That evening, as the snow thickened outside, Lin Mei tucked him into the cradle. Xiaotian curled against her arm, tail wrapping around his tiny body like a silk ribbon. She stroked his soft fur, whispering stories she had made up about the world beyond the mountains, fields of flowers, rivers that sparkled like jewels, lantern festivals that glowed like fireflies. And though he could not yet understand every word, Xiaotian seemed to listen. His eyes, round and bright, reflected a growing intelligence, a curiosity for life that Lin Mei knew would never be extinguished. As she finally blew out the small lantern on her table, she looked down at him sleeping peacefully. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we will learn more, we will explore, we will laugh, and together we will show the world that love does not always follow the rules it should." Outside, the snow continued to fall, but the warmth inside that little clay house had grown to a flame that could not be snuffed. In the heart of a village that often whispered and doubted, Lin Mei had found her miracle, and it had 4 tiny hands and a mischievous tail. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had thought lost forever: hope, in the shape of a small, bright-eyed creature who would call her mother. The first morning the father returned, he had expected a house filled with sorrow, the empty silence of grief. Instead, he found laughter. Lin Mi stood in the kitchen, kneeling on a small stool, showing Xiaotian how to scoop rice from a bowl. The little monkey's tiny hands trembled with concentration, grains spilling everywhere, but his excitement was infectious. "Try it this way," she encouraged, guiding his paw with a gentle smile. At the doorway, the father froze, blinking in surprise. "What?" he whispered, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks. Xiaotian looked up, his round eyes sparkling. With a squeak that sounded almost like a greeting, he toddled toward the man, arms outstretched. The father's heart cracked open in a way he hadn't realized it needed. "Well, hello there, little one," he said, crouching down. Xiaotian squealed in delight and climbed onto his shoulder, wrapping his tiny arms around the man's neck. The father laughed, a deep, warm sound, and lifted him carefully into his lap. "Look at him," Lin Mi said, eyes shining. "He's learning to eat like a human. He's clever, isn't he?" "Clever?" the father murmured, feeding Xiaotian a small piece of rice. The monkey took it eagerly, chattering happily. The father laughed again, a sound that seemed to fill the room like sunshine. He fed another bite, then another, each one followed by delighted squeals from Xiaotian. Soon they were all playing together. The father tried to teach Xiaotian how to stack bowls, only to have them tumble in a hilarious mess. Xiaotian screeched with joy, the bowls clattering to the floor, while Lin Mi clapped and laughed so hard she nearly fell over. By mid-afternoon, the trio had moved outside. Xiaotian ran ahead on little wobbly legs, then scampered up the father's arm like a practiced climber, peeking over his shoulder with curiosity. The father and mother exchanged a glance, and both burst into laughter at the sight of their unusual but perfect family.
They built a little fort of bamboo and blankets, with Xiaotian proudly claiming it as his castle. The father pretended to be a fearsome dragon, roaring and chasing him around, while Lin Mei cheered, capturing every squeak and tumble with joy in her eyes. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the village gold, the father lifted Xiaotian onto his shoulders one last time for the day. The little monkey wrapped his arms around the man's head, nuzzling close, while Lin Mei held his tiny feet to steady him. In that moment, all three of them, the mother, the father, and the little monkey who had stolen their hearts, stood together, laughing, feeding, playing, and simply being. The house, once quiet with sorrow, now pulsed with life, love, and the simple happiness of a family united in the most unexpected way. And for the first time in many long years, the father thought, perhaps miracles really do come in the smallest, furriest packages.